Good afternoon, members. Today we have with us a young and enthusiastic speaker, CA Shubham Khaitan, with us. He has completed CS, CFA, DSA, and LLB along with CA. He is partner of S. Khaitan and Associates, a 30-year-old firm where he leads the tax and regulatory division. He is member of various committees, including GST and Indirect Tax Committee of ICAI, State Council, Economic Affairs and Taxation Committee of Confederation of Indian Industry, and various other committees. He has also authored a book, A Practical Guide to GST on Textile Industry, and has been part of drafting teams of many other books. He has also been conducting trainings for corporates, trade associations, universities, etc. There is so much more to speak about, sir, but I'll let sir do the talking. Over to you, sir.
Thank you so much. First of all, thank you so much to the Young to Learn team for inviting me here as a speaker. And as I understand, the major aspect that we wanted in this session from the point of view of the audience was the practical aspects of the e-commerce sector. And our focus would be on the practical aspects more rather than the simple provisions of the law. Obviously, we'll be going through the provisions, but those provisions, how is it being practically applied? How is it the sector that is? How is the sector functioning? We'll look at a few decisions which have come in the e-commerce sector, and finally, we'll end up with a few models of the bigger companies of the e-commerce sector and their impact on GST. And in between itself, we'll talk about the issues that these sector is being facing because of a number of changes which has been going on, and this industry has been a fairly new industry. And under the earlier law, if you look at it, there was no particular provision specifically for the e-commerce sector. But under GST, this has been brought in for the first time, understanding the need of this sector having its specific requirements. Now, without much ado, let me just start with the basic definition which has been provided with e-commerce, and then we'll jump to the models of e-commerce sector. E-commerce definition that has been provided here: e-commerce means the supply of goods or services, or both, including digital products over digital or electronic network. So first of all, we need to understand that when we understand digital products don't only mean products which are provided over the internet, or electronic doesn't only mean what is provided over the internet. So e-commerce can be something which is beyond the internet as well. So something which is probably provided over the phone. Even that can be considered as e-commerce. For instance, let's say we are having a facility of booking a cab over the phone. Let's say there's a facility of, let's say, Guru Cabs, wherein we call up over the phone and the cab gets booked automatically. Even that is considered to be a digital product or an electronic product, which is considered to be e-commerce, though they may not have any website, or they may not have any particular presence over the internet. So digital means something which is within the network, and not just internet. It may include even telephonic network. Now, also, we need to understand that not all the products which are over the internet can be considered as e-commerce. When we are discussing the models in the next slide, we'll understand that there are a lot of things which are there on the internet which cannot be considered as e-commerce in the first place. Now, let's understand a definition of e-commerce operator. E-commerce operator means any person who owns, operates, manages, or digital or electronic facility or platform for e-commerce. So somebody who's an operator, he can either be a person who owns that platform, or he simply can be a person who manages that platform. So a person who is managing that platform can also be considered as an e-commerce operator, and not just the person who's owning the platform. Now, the supplies which are to be made through e-commerce here may be in the form of B2B, B2C, C2B, C2C. It may sound weird here as to how can there be a C2B supply or C2C supply. So first of all, let's understand how is it a B2B supply that happens over the internet. So if you look at websites like Sulekha.com, IndiaMart.com, these are supposed to attract businesses. So a business in need of any service approaches these websites, and these websites in turn provides the relevant contact of the service provider who provides these services online. So when we are talking about B2B services, it means that the person who's providing the service and the person who's receiving the service are both online, and the persons who are the recipients here are also businesses here. So there are websites which are only for businesses getting access to those websites, like IndiaMart and Sulekha.com. B2C, we all know, can include everything from providing restaurant services online to Amazon, Flipkart, providing goods or services, Uber, Ola. Everything is, sorry, not Uber, Ola. I would rather say this is only constrained to cases wherein Amazon, Flipkart, or any restaurant is having the services being provided online. In case of C2B services, what happens is that the consumer is the one who approaches the business here. In case of an Uber and Ola transaction, what happens is the customer is the one who books the cab after opening the website. So here the customer is the one who's providing the order. So basically, who is the one who's getting the taking the order here? It's in C2B transaction, it's the customer. So in C2B transaction, Uber and Ola transactions can be included. In C2C, what happens? The buyer and seller both are considered to be consumers. What can be an example of this? Example, in case of an OLX transaction, the consumer is the one who's selling his personal product to another person who is actually buying that product. It may be an old furniture or anything of that sort. So in case of C2C transaction, the person who's selling and the person who's buying both are considered to be consumers. It just happens to be on an electronic platform. That is why it is considered as an e-commerce transaction. Now let us look at a few important models under which the e-commerce operators work. Now, which of these can be considered as e-commerce and which of these, we'll discuss this one by one, right? There are certain persons who are only displaying their goods online. For instance, if I'm a person who's selling, let's say, dried flowers online. If I'm selling dried flowers online, it may happen that I need a catalog which the customers can access online and see which are the products which I'm selling. However, I don't take orders over the internet. The relevant person can only access my website and see the relevant products in which I'm dealing in, but the products needs to be, the orders needs to be placed offline. It may be through, an email or anything of that sort, but it's not happening through the website. In that case, it is not considered as an e-commerce operator, because here the transactions happening online, offline. Only thing is that the products are being displayed online. Second, information portal only provides information without any supply of goods or services. So what are we saying here essentially is that there are certain portals which only provide information, but there is no supply of goods or services happening. There are a lot of aspects which you search on Google, but for example, if you access Wikipedia, you would see a plethora of information which is being displayed online, but it doesn't mean there's a supply of goods or services happening online. Simply because there's a website which is providing us supply, doesn't really providing us information, it doesn't mean that we are having a supply of goods or services happening through that. Third is portals allowing transactions of selection and payment of goods or services. Now, there are certain persons who are having their own electronic commerce platform and they are selling their own goods through that platform. So on this portal, there is no sale of goods or services of another person, but the sale happens of self. For example, in case of StarMark, if you want to buy any goods or services, you can simply log in online and you can create your profile and select the goods which you want to buy. So StarMark has a store of its own, but StarMark has its own website also. So the website can be used for whatever for ordering whatever goods are there. So there is no seller, external seller, who can buy the goods from this portal. We need to understand that in all the three cases which I've discussed till now, there is no requirement of TCS also. So TCS is a concept for e-commerce which we'll discuss in a while, but TCS is also not applicable for all the three cases that we have discussed till now. So person selling goods online may be himself considered as an e-commerce operator in the third case, selection. Somebody muted. Okay, the person who is selling the goods online is considered to be an e-commerce operator through electronic or digital network, but there is no concept of TCS because the person who is selling the goods and the person who is managing the website are the same persons. Next, e-commerce operators supplying goods after the transfer of title to them. So in this situation, what happens is in this model, for example, if you look at Amazon, Flipkart, all these sell goods online themselves also. So apart from sellers being listed online on these websites of Amazon and Flipkart, certain products are directly sold by Amazon and Flipkart. So Amazon sells it through something called as Cloudtail India, and Flipkart has WS Retail. So so what happens is these goods are actually in the warehouse, and they are actually owned by the e-commerce operator. So e-commerce operator buy the products from different people, from different vendors, and then they sell the goods after the transfer of title to them. So in this case, there are no sellers selling the goods online, but the e-commerce operator directly selling the goods to the customer. Even though they may have sellers online, but for the products which are being sold, they are being sold directly by the e-commerce operator. So Amazon and Flipkart have their own, as I said, cases where they are selling it on their own. That would be covered in the fourth box. Again, since the person who is selling the goods is the one who's managing the website, there is no concept of TCS in this case. Next situation, e-commerce operator through which services are provided under 9 subsection 5 and otherwise. Now under 9 subsection 5, certain services have been mentioned, which we'll discuss in just a while. So I'll discuss about 9.5 services in just a while, but we can for the time being, we can remember that Uber, Ola, and all those cases where services are provided online would be covered. So it would be coming next slide, which we'll see in just a while. Now, the last but not the least, e-commerce operator through which goods and services are supplied as per section 52. So this is the last bullet wherein we are talking about TCS provisions. So in case of Amazon, Flipkart, or even cases wherein in case of Swiggy, wherein the restaurant is the one who is selling the goods online through the relevant platform, which may be Swiggy or Zomato, or it may be the seller is the one who's selling the goods, maybe through a platform, Amazon or Flipkart. So in all these cases, TCS provisions would be applicable, right? Usually they work on 2 different models that we are seeing in front of it. In fact, there are other models also which we'll discuss, but these 2 are the primary models that we see that they work in. So first is the combined commission model. In case of combined commission model, what happens is the seller who is selling the products online, whatever value is realized by them through the sale of product online, they get they pay 25% to 40% of the commission. Usually it ranges around 30% the commission amount, but this amount really paid to the e-commerce platform. The e-commerce platform, while after collecting payment from the customers, so let's say I am the one who's buying goods from Amazon, and you are the one who's selling goods through Amazon. In that case, Amazon, after collecting payment from me, would pay to you. When they are about to pay to you, they would be deducting a commission which may range between 25% to 40%. So here, wherever the goods are getting delivered throughout the country, it may be in Delhi, Calcutta, Chennai, the commission amount remains the same in all the cases in case of combined commission model. In the second model, what happens is the commission may range between 10% to 15%, but the logistics cost is borne by the seller. So a seller who is in Delhi may be happier to deliver the goods to Gurgaon, but if he gets an order in Chennai, then the logistics cost would be comparatively higher. But whatever logistics cost comes here, the entire amount of that logistics cost is passed on by the e-commerce operator to the seller. The seller is the one who bears the entire cost of the logistics in this case. So if he's delivering goods from Delhi to Gurgaon, he would be having a very small cost comparatively, and from Delhi to Chennai, the cost would be much higher. And we should not consider only delivery cost here as logistics. Logistics may include your packing as well, and logistics may include, if the goods are returned, then the reverse logistics cost. So in case there's a very high percentage of return in the e-commerce industry, wherein not less than 10 to 15% products which are sold online are returned. So in all these cases, the logistics cost is very high. So the logistics cost in case of reverse logistics, as we understand in case of goods return, is also borne by the e-commerce operator in this second model that we are seeing in front of us. Okay, now we'll divide all the e-commerce operators in this slide. From this slide, we'll have an idea about a holistic idea about the cases wherein taxes are to be paid by the supplier or the e-commerce operator here, right? So supplies by e-commerce operator can be divided into two parts. First is supplies in the form of goods. Second is supply in the form of services. If the supply is in the form of goods, in that case, two situations can happen. First, supply is by own self. As I gave the example of StarMark, StarMark is having its own website through which it is supplying. In that case, tax is to be charged by the e-commerce operator, which is the StarMark here, which is managing its own website. Second, others are supplying through it. That means if you're talking about Amazon and Flipkart, the persons who are supplying the goods are different from the persons who are actually managing the platform. So Amazon and Flipkart is managing the platform, but the persons who are supplying the goods are different. And the tax is to be charged by the person who is selling the goods. So whenever you see that you would be buying products from Amazon and Flipkart, in most of the cases, you'll find that whenever you see an invoice, the name of the seller is never Amazon and Flipkart. The name of the seller is the person who's actually the seller who was enlisted on the website and who sold the goods to the relevant recipient. In case of services, there are three situations that we're seeing in front of us. Supply by own self. Supply by own self. In this case, what happens is, if services are supplied by own self, then taxes are to be charged by the e-commerce operator. So let's say I am a person who's providing my opinion online. I have enlisted, somebody can approach me, somebody provides me their query and I give a reply to that query. For that, I'm charging. In that case, I'm supplying the services on my own through the e-commerce platform. In this case, tax is to be, of course, charged by me. Second case, others supplying the goods through it under 9(5). We'll see the cases of 9(5) in just a while. For a time being, we should remember that in case of Uber and Ola, the tax is to be charged by Uber and Ola and not the driver. But we'll see this particular second bullet in detail in the next slide. Third case, the services which are supplied other than the ones who are provided under 9(5). In that case, tax is to be charged by the supplier. Let's say in case of restaurant services which are provided through Swiggy or Zomato, in these cases what happens is these services are not provided under 9 subsection 5, which provides a list of services. In that case, the tax is never charged by Zomato or Swiggy. It is charged by the relevant restaurant which is providing the food. So tax is to be charged by the restaurant and never by the e-commerce operator in such a situation. However, in the second box that we are seeing in front of us, certain services, the tax is to be charged by the e-commerce operator, right? We'll see these cases in the next slide now. Okay, this is talking about 9 subsection 5. Central government or state government on recommendations of the council, by notification, it can specify certain category of services, which if provided through e-commerce operator, tax is to be paid by the e-commerce operator as if he's the person liable to pay tax. Now we need to remember here that in case of 9 subsection 5, wherever supply of services happens online and these services have been provided through e-commerce operator, tax will be paid by the e-commerce operator under 9 subsection 5, and he will be considered as the supplier liable for paying taxes. That means the person who is the actual supplier will not be liable to pay taxes. In fact, the person who will be liable to pay taxes will be the e-commerce operator, because e-commerce operator will be deemed to be the supplier in 9 subsection 5. This is an exception wherein the actual supplier is not paying taxes, but the person who is the e-commerce operator who's paying taxes. How are we saying that the driver is the one who's the supplier, not the Uber and Ola? Let's try and understand this through an example. First example that we are seeing in front of us, as we are seeing, is services by way of transportation of passengers by radio taxi, motor cab, maxi cab, motorcycle. So here we are talking about all the cases wherein tax services are provided by Uber, Ola. It may be in the form of bike, it may be in the form of car, it may be in the form of even if you look at motor cabs, maxi cabs. This is of a higher size if you consider it compared to a motor car. So even in all these cases, in case of Uber and Ola, the person who is the supplier is deemed to be Uber and Ola. Now, question that is arising, as I said, is how are the suppliers not Uber and Ola, but actually the driver? Let us understand this. The driver is the one who is not an employee of Uber and Ola. Once he switches off his mobile phone at a particular point of time because he doesn't want to work, Uber and Ola can never call the driver and ask him, why are you not working? You are supposed to work from this time to this time for us. Here, the driver is the one who is getting an incentive from working, and he's not a person who is a part-time or even a full-time employee. He may decide today not to work for Uber, but he wants to switch to Ola. Then also nobody can ask him a question, right? So the point is, the one who's dropping the passengers from one location to another location is an independent person. That person is the one who's providing the services in this case. So in this case, even though the actual service provider is Uber and is the driver, it is deemed under 9 subsection 5 that the supplier will be Uber and Ola. That is the e-commerce operator, and tax will be paid by the e-commerce operator in that case. That means the driver cannot be held liable for such payment of taxes. It is the company who will be held liable in this situation. Next, services by way of providing accommodation in hotels, except where the person supplying such service through e-commerce operator is liable for registration. So what we need to understand here is the person who's providing the accommodation in hotels, let's say in case of Oyo rooms, the person who is providing the service is the hotel itself, right? But since the hotel was enlisted on the e-commerce platform, in that case, it may fall under 9(5), except where the hotel itself is not liable for registration. That means, let's say the hotel has a turnover of less than 20 lakhs. In that case, if it is enlisted on the website of an e-commerce operator through which it is providing accommodation services, then the hotel will not be liable to pay tax. The e-commerce operator will be liable. Having said that, if the person supplying the service is enlisted on the website, and he's also having a turnover of more than 20 lakhs, in that case, the person who is providing the hotel accommodation services and having a turnover of more than 20 lakhs and liable for registration would be the one who will be charging taxes. In that case, 9(5) would not apply. Third situation, services by way of housekeeping, such as plumbing, carpenting, except where the person supplying such service through the e-commerce operator is liable for registration. So we are taking example of Urban Clap, wherein plumbing and carpenting services are provided online. So plumber and carpenter, since it is expected that they have a turnover of less than 20 lakh rupees, so the person who will be liable for payment of taxes in this situation would be Urban Clap and not the plumber and carpenter. Having said that, in a situation where is the person who is providing service through this platform is himself having a turnover of more than 20 lakh rupees, right? So let us say a CA providing services through Urban Clap. So in that case, the person who is liable to pay taxes will be the CA because he's having a turnover of more than 20 lakh rupees, right? Okay. Now we'll take a couple of advanced ruling judgments which may be very important here. In this case, let's understand the situation which is there in front of us. Opta Cabs was engaged in the business of taxi aggregation services, very similar to Uber and Ola, but there was a very significant difference in their business model. In this case, in case of Opta Cabs, the Opta Cabs was collecting a monthly usage charges from the taxi driver, a fixed charge from the taxi driver they used to collect every month, right? And let's say it may be, let's say 3,000 rupees that they are collecting from the taxi driver each month, right? And they would not collect a single rupee from the customers. And they would charge GST on this 3,000 rupees which was collected from the customers. And once they collected this amount, it did not matter how many rides did the taxi driver make, how many rides did the customer have, it didn't really matter. Whatever transactions were happening, invoicing was to be done directly between the taxi driver and the customer, and the payment also was happening directly between the driver and the customer. So whatever happened, it used to happen directly between the driver and customer. For that, Opta Cabs used to get a monthly usage charges, a fixed monthly usage charges. So question was, since services are being provided through Opta Cabs, but the money is being paid directly by customer to the cab driver and invoicing is to be done through that only, the question is whether this will fall under 9th subsection 5. That was the question which was there in front of everyone, right? So what the Appellate Advanced Ruling Authority say here? It said that tax is to be paid by the e-commerce operator in this situation. Why? Because the liability for tax will be on the e-commerce operator wherever the services are provided through the e-commerce operator. This word "through" had a lot of significance in this judgment, and they said that simply because the appellant is saying, that means Opta Cabs is saying we are only providing booking services and those supplies are being provided, that is incorrect, because booking is the supply which is happening here. Booking is the part of the activity of the entire supply without which services cannot be provided. So supply may be in the form of a mere request or a mere PO. So purchase order which is being generated through the e-commerce platform can simply be case wherein the supplies are provided through the e-commerce operator. And since in this case supplies are provided through the e-commerce operator, tax will be paid by the e-commerce operator. This is something which is an extraordinary situation wherein the amount has been collected by the driver, but the tax is to be paid by the e-commerce operator. This judgment has its own doubts, to be honest, because in this case, whether supplies was through e-commerce operator or not can be a really big question mark, because the payment which was happening was between two persons. E-commerce operator was only a place wherein two people were meeting with each other, right? And for that, there was a charge being collected, similar to OLX as we see. In case of OLX, there's a platform wherein seller and buyer meet. But does OLX need to pay taxes? Answer is no. So here, when we are talking about e-commerce operator here, whether tax is to be paid by the e-commerce operator, practically, to my humble opinion, this is a very precarious situation. I don't feel here the tax should be paid by the e-commerce operator. Rather, the whatever liability should be there, that should be on the driver, because the driver is providing the services, and only the services of booking is happening, which is not supply. Supply has to happen because the entire service has to be provided through the platform, which is not happening here, right? So according to me, this judgment has its own question mark, but we need to wait and see how does this crystallize when these questions are actually raised before tribunals and high courts in the days to come, because this kind of judgment was not there under earlier law also. So we'll have to wait and watch. Unfortunately, persons who are working on these kind of business models have tweaked their business models in order to make sure the liability does not come upon them. A lot of people have started paying taxes even though they feel that even though taxes may not be leviable upon them, simply because services are being provided through their platform, right? So let's proceed further on one more judgment, which was in case of AAR Karnataka, in case of Humble Mobile Solutions. If you are aware, in Bangalore, there's an app called as DriveU app. What happens in the DriveU app is that if you want a driver for a day, you can simply place a request, and wherever the driver is, the drivers are enlisted with the e-commerce platform, and then the driver is sent for a day. For this, the payment is made by the relevant customer to the e-commerce operator. The question is, is the transportation of passenger service being provided here? See, we need to remember here, it is not the drivers are not being provided with the vehicles. In case of Uber and Ola, driver is provided with the vehicle. Here the vehicle is with the customer, but he does not have a driver. So he needs a driver through this app. So here the drivers are driving the vehicles which are belonging to the customer. So can we say that they were providing services of transportation of passenger to what the Karnataka Advanced Ruling Authority said was, no, this cannot be considered as services by of transportation of passengers. This is merely a manpower supply services. 9.5 covers transportation of passengers. So if transportation of passengers is not being provided here, we cannot say that 9.5 can be applicable. So if 9.5 is not applicable, what is happening here is DriveU is supposed to provide an invoice of manpower supply DriveU is supposed to only raise an invoice upon the driver. Let's understand how does this model work. Let us say for one day, a driver charges, let's say 1,000 rupees from this app, right? Now, the entire amount of 1,000 rupees is collected by this Humble Mobile Solutions, which is the DriveU app. 1,000 rupees is collected by this DriveU app. And let us say they are paying 800 rupees to the driver and 200 rupees is retained by them as commission, right? So in this case, since the driver is getting, the driver is the one who is the one who's providing the service, driver is supposed to raise an invoice of 1,000 rupees to the customer, and DriveU app is supposed to raise an invoice of 200 rupees to the DriveU app. So driver will raise an invoice of 200. The DriveU app will raise an invoice of 200 rupees on the driver, and the driver will raise an invoice of 1,000 rupees on the customer, according to this model which has been said here. So once 1,000 rupees is collected by the DriveU app, it will pay 800 rupees to the driver. Of course, tax, TCS, everything would be applicable. I'm not getting into the calculation of that. We'll see that calculation in just a while. But just discussing the basic model here, the DriveU app will only be liable to pay taxes on the commission which it is getting for 200 rupees. On the 1,000 rupees, the driver himself will be liable to pay taxes. Okay. Now, there are certain practical aspects of this e-commerce business that we should understand before we get into the provisions of TCS. See, we are talking about cases wherein Amazon and Flipkart are the e-commerce platform through which goods are being sold. In such cases, what will happen? In such cases, where the goods are damaged on the way. Let's say I'm a person who is enlisted on Amazon, right? Now, I as the seller, I get an order from Amazon. Once I send the goods, let's say the goods get destroyed on the way. There's a damage of goods which happens on the way. Now, the person who's required to deliver is supposed to be Amazon. It was not my fault that the goods got damaged on the way. The customer will obviously return those goods. They will not pay for those goods. When I had removed those goods from my place of business, I had issued a sale invoice. Here in this case, credit note is to be provided by the vendor to the customer because the customer will return those damaged goods. So for sales, the invoice was there. For the sales return, the credit note needs to be issued by vendor to the customer. This we all are aware of. However, there's one particular aspect which is also important here, that here the e-commerce operator will also be issuing an invoice to the vendor. So e-commerce operator, what it is supposed to do here in this case, Amazon or Flipkart was the one who was liable to make sure the goods reach safely to the recipient, but it did not happen. So in such cases, what will be the situation? The seller will not bear the burden, as a result of which whatever commission is to be charged by Amazon or Flipkart to the vendor, that particular commission amount will get reduced by this credit note. So there will be a commission invoice against which there will be a credit note which will be further given by the e-commerce operator to the vendor. Now, to be honest, the vendor has a huge task in front of him to make sure that he is able to make all these reconciliations of which goods had been sent and which goods had been received and for which he has received the credit note from the e-commerce operator. Because unless until this happens, he will not be able to reconcile his accounts and find out whether he has received the adequate money from the e-commerce operator. So this is again a very challenging task, to be honest, and it requires a lot of records to be maintained on the part of the e-commerce operator and on the part of the vendor as well. Okay, Now, where the goods are returned by the customer as damaged owing to the vendor, that means the seller is the one who's responsible, and he had first sold those goods, he had issued a sale invoice. When the goods are returned, he is issuing a credit note. But we also need to remember, if the goods are damaged to such an extent there is no realization also from such goods, then there may be an ITC reversal which may be required under 17.5 H. Under 17.5 H, it has been mentioned where the goods have been destroyed, stolen, lost, or goods have been distributed by way of free samples or gifts. ITC cannot be taken on in these cases. So where the goods have been damaged, and the vendor is the one who's getting the brunt of it, in that case, he may have to reverse his ITC as well under 17.5H. Now, just a practical insight of this industry, sales return should be below the range of 15%. We need to understand, wherever the sales return is more than 15%, it may range up to 35% or 40%. If this is happening, then the vendor needs to be very careful, because in such situations, the vendor needs to evaluate his business model, because if we consider the reverse logistics cost, which is the cost for getting the goods back, the cost of damage, the stock opportunity loss, because the stock had been there with him for very long now, it had been sent back and received, so there's a holding cost to the stock, that may result in a business which is not possibly as fruitful or as lucrative as it should be. So a vendor who's wanting to sell the goods online should be very careful about this. If they are having a sales return of more than this amount, the seller should investigate this, right? Okay. Multiple order IDs in case of large vendors. In case of large vendors, what happens is, how does this usually model works? Let's understand this very carefully. There's an online order ID which gets generated. As soon as Amazon receives an order, it forwards the order to the vendor. The vendor has an order ID generated. Now that order ID has a lot of statuses which are mentioned online. It may be that the order has been received, yet to be processed, order has been sent, it has maybe delivered, a lot of status which is there. Now, the status of this may not be updated on a real-time basis. So whenever the goods are sent, the goods are shown as a sale. And by the time the vendor receives the information that the goods have been returned, he may not be aware which goods from which order ID is to be returned till the goods are actually received. Unless and until, in practically what happens is, most of the vendors struggle to have the real-time data from the e-commerce operators. It may be available with them probably in a week or 10 days or 15 days, depending on the e-commerce operator. But the report which is received for the sales return may not be available with them. So in case of this e-commerce operator business, the accounting becomes very difficult, particularly in case of month end, when he's not aware that which goods are to be returned. So in that case, the stock planning, because he may have ordered that stock once again, it may be available with him. He may not be aware that the goods are to be received back by him once again, because the goods have been returned by the customer. So in such cases, the stock planning, the accounting becomes slightly difficult. Now, it may also happen, the vendors also struggle with stock out situations happening online. What happens is, online, whenever goods are sold, there may not be a check on the quantity every time. As a result of which, it may happen that the vendors may not have the adequate quantity left, which may result in the image of that vendor getting tarnished online, because the reviews which every customer provides these days is against that vendor, and once that ratings goes down, it's very difficult to do business online as well. The stock out is another situation which they face. And obviously, barcoding is the requirement which almost every e-commerce operator has these days for the vendors. So this is something which is important. So I was just getting into the practical aspects, some of which concern the major aspects of GST here as well. Right? Let's proceed further. Now, what is place of business? Definition of place of business is where the business is ordinarily carried on. It may be where the goods are, from which the goods are being provided, stored, or received, or where the stock is being maintained, or where the books of accounts are being maintained, or where the taxable person is engaged in the business through an agent. Now, let us see in which cases will be required to register our places as additional places of business, where the additional, maybe the e-commerce operator will be registering it as additional place of business. Let's see all those situations in front of us. These are the different mechanisms of delivery which happens in case of e-commerce operator. First case, goods are sold by the seller, but the packing and happens at the e-commerce operator's warehouse. So here what happens is, let's say I am the seller, what I'm required to do is, once I get an order, or even before getting an order, certain goods I'm required to keep at the warehouse of the e-commerce operator. The e-commerce operator will perform quality control and he will deliver it to the customer. So in this case, the order does not get directly delivered from seller's premises, but it needs to have regular quality control check, which will be done by the e-commerce operator. In such cases, it is recommended that since the goods are being stored temporarily at the e-commerce warehouse in between, the seller should also register such premises of the e-commerce operator where the goods are temporarily stored as his additional place of business. It is recommended. Next, goods sold and delivered to warehouse of e-commerce operator, then sold by e-commerce operator to customer. So here, goods are being sold to the e-commerce operator and then e-commerce operator sells to the customer. So here, e-commerce operator is acting as a seller and buyer here. And the entire risk and rewards once the goods leaves the premises of the vendor becomes that of the e-commerce operator, right? So this is a situation where no additional place of business is required to be registered by the seller, but it is only required to be registered by the e-commerce operator as his own warehouse. E-commerce operator obviously has his own warehouse registered. Even e-commerce warehouse owner, e-commerce operator will not require the registration of the place of the vendor in this second case, right? In the first case, obviously, since goods, in the third case, sorry, not in the first case of what I was saying, in the third case, where the goods are directly dispatched from the seller's premises. This is something which happens very frequently, where the goods are directly dispatched from the seller's premises to the final customer. E-commerce operator does not bring it to his own warehouse or does not do any quality control on that. In such cases, since goods are moving directly and the e-commerce operator is responsible for making sure that the whatever delivery challan, e-way bill or the invoicing, whatever happens here needs to happen from the seller's premises. Bill from would be from the seller's premises. Sorry, bill from would be from the bill from in first case. So this third bullet may be applicable in the first case as well in the second case. Dispatch is happening from seller's premises, but it may happen that the goods are being had not been transferred to the e-commerce operator. In such cases, e-commerce operator would register the seller's premises as his additional place of business because he would be showing the dispatch. So e-commerce operator, if you look at rule 138, the e-commerce operator can generate the e-way bill on behalf of the seller, and e-commerce operator can do will undertake the entire responsibility of delivery of such goods in such a scenario. In this case, where the goods are being directly sold from the seller's premises, the e-commerce operator would add the seller's premises as an additional place of business where the goods from where the goods are being supplied. So this is where the goods are being supplied. Since the goods are being supplied from this place, it gets covered within the place of business. If you look at the box in front of us, where the goods are stored, provided, or received. Since the goods are being provided from the seller's premises, e-commerce operator would also register the seller's premises as his additional place of business. Further, where the goods are being delivered, goods are sold to the e-commerce operator and then e-commerce operator to the customer, but the goods are directly dispatched from the seller's premises. In this case also, e-commerce operator is like storing the goods in the premises of the seller. because the goods had been transferred to the e-commerce operator, but the goods are being sold directly from the seller's premises. In this case also, e-commerce operator would be adding seller's premises as his additional place of business. Now let us look at a couple of other delivery mechanisms. 3PL services. 3PL means third party fulfillment services. In this case, what happens? The inventory is purchased by the vendor. So I'm a vendor who's enlisted on a particular platform, but I am making sure that the inventory is pre-purchased with me so that there is no problem of delivering it whenever it is required. But I am not a person who can manage the platform of e-commerce operators. So what I do is, and I cannot deliver the goods myself either. So what I do is I may be having my own website. So let's say I have my own website. I have pre-purchased certain inventory, but I cannot manage that inventory. I cannot deliver that inventory. And I cannot do that on a real-time basis. I don't have the logistics mechanism for that. In that case, I pre-purchase the inventory and I give it to the third-party service provider. Now, as soon as I receive an order, I inform the third-party service provider whose responsibility is to make sure that the goods reach safely to the service to the customer. Any return which needs to happen will also happen through this 3PL service provider. So here there's an additional cost which the vendor will be incurring, because the vendor will be having the inventory pre-purchased, and he also needs to pay the service provider who is managing his inventory and who is undertaking the logistics cost on behalf of him, and the logistics services are provided on behalf of him. Next is drop shipping. Again, a very novel mechanism. In fact, this is something which is very frequent these days. Drop shipping is something which regularly happens in the industry. In this case, what happens is that this model, the cost of this model is very low. So if we carry out the business under this drop shipping model, the cost is very low, but at the same time, there's a risk that the goods may not reach the consumer on time. Here, what is happening is there is no inventory which is maintained by the seller or the vendor. What the vendor does is, as soon as it receives an order, it requests the manufacturer. That means the seller requests his own supplier or his own vendor, that is maybe the manufacturer, to deliver the goods directly to the customer. Since the gestation period is very low between the receipt of order and supply, and between the receipt of order and the delivery of the order to the customer, the seller does not even receive the inventory. He receives the order, he provides the manufacturer the location of the customer, and the manufacturer directly provides that delivery to the recipient finally, right? So here the most important situation is who is issuing the invoice in this situation. If the invoice is issued by the seller, in that case, the manufacturer will raise an invoice upon the seller and seller upon the final customer. This will be like a bill to ship to model, wherein the manufacturer will bill to the seller and ship to the final customer. And seller will in turn raise an invoice upon the customer, right? Obviously, the customer will only get the invoice of the seller and not the manufacturer. But if the invoicing is being directly done by the manufacturer to the customer, in that case, the manufacturer will raise an invoice upon the customer, and the seller will in turn raise an invoice of commission on the manufacturer. In this case, the seller will be an agent for commission if the manufacturer directly raises an invoice upon the customer. In that case, seller will be a person who's only a commission agent who would only be receiving the commission for procuring the order. And in cases where the seller is raising the invoices in own name, in that case, there will be a purchase and sale transaction or a bill to ship to transaction that will be happening in front of us. Okay, and now we are seeing the TCS provisions in front of us. I won't get into the provisions in detail. Once again, our focus is the issues and not the provisions here. The practical aspects that we'll see in front of us in just a while. E-commerce operator is required to collect TCS on net value of taxable supplies at GSTN level. What do we mean by GSTN level? I may be a seller having businesses in multiple states. In that case, the e-commerce operator, when he's collecting TCS for each GSTN, he'll calculate the TCS separately, right? Second, it would be on the net value of taxable supplies. What is net value? Net value is the aggregate, that is the gross value of taxable supplies minus the value of supplies returned. So the gross value minus supplies returned. So I may have sold goods worth rupees 100 during the month and 10 rupees of goods got returned. So TCS will be calculated on 90 rupees here. Now this is important. Made through it by other suppliers. So the supply has to happen through the e-commerce platform. Until the supply is happening through the platform, it will not be falling within TCS provisions. Simply because there's a case where an e-commerce platform is there, it doesn't mean that supplies are happening through the e-commerce platform. It may happen that there are two persons who are meeting on Facebook and they decide to sell goods to each other, right? In that case, the supply is not happening through Facebook. Only two people had met on Facebook, right? So here it will not be considered as TCS, which would be applicable, right? So it has to happen through the platform and it's not merely two people meeting on the platform, right? Okay. Whether consideration with respect to such supplies is collected by the e-commerce operator. Once again, an important condition is that the consideration is required to be collected by the e-commerce operator. Who is actually collecting the consideration does not matter. Let us say a situation where the seller is himself collecting the money from the final buyer. But as per the model, it should be collected by the e-commerce operator. Even if the money is being directly collected by the seller and not through the e-commerce operator, still it would fall within the TCS provisions. But because as per the business model, that consideration is required to be collected by the e-commerce operator. Who is actually collecting the consideration does not matter, but who is required to collect the consideration as per the business model matters. This has been clarified through frequently asked questions, which was released by the government when the TCS provisions was introduced. Rate of TCS 1% IGST. In case of intrastate supplies, it would be 0.5% CGST, 0.5% SGST. Very quickly, let's go through the provisions. Whatever amount is collected in a particular month, TCS is to be paid by 10th of the next month. So in case of April, whatever supplies are happening through the e-commerce platform, by 10th of May, TCS is to be paid. GSTR 8 is a return which is required to be filed by this e-commerce operator who will disclose the details of supplies which happened through the e-commerce operator, disclosing the name of the supplier, vendor who had made the supply and the value of those supplies within GSTR 8. So TCS and GSTR 8 would go hand in hand. First TCS is to be deposited, then GSTR 8 is to be filed. Once GSTR 8 is filed, deductee would be able to claim the creditors in his electronic cash ledger. And then there would be a matching which would be happening between whatever GSTR 1 is filed by the vendor. Vendor would file GSTR 1 showing the supplies which has happened through the e-commerce operator, and whatever supplies has been disclosed by the e-commerce operator in his GSTR 8, these two will be matched. Further, operator, which is the e-commerce operator, will be submitting an annual statement in GSTR 9B. 9B is something which is required to be filed by the e-commerce operator in respect of supplies which happened through it and the amount collected by 31st of December. Further, an e-commerce operator can get a notice from the deputy commissioner or any other person above the deputy commissioner for which he has to disclose. In that case, he has to disclose whatever stock is being held by him on behalf of the supplier. So in certain cases, as I mentioned, the goods are being provided by the e-commerce operator, by the vendor to the e-commerce operator, but for quality control, and then the goods are cleared by the e-commerce operator. In such a situation, whatever stock is being maintained by the e-commerce operator, that needs to be disclosed. And in such a case, it is also recommended that the seller should disclose the warehouse of the e-commerce operator as his additional place of business. Further, whatever supplies happen through the e-commerce operator for that vendor, that also needs to be disclosed. Or for all the vendors, it may be required by the deputy commissioner. So based on that, it needs to be disclosed, TCS. Now, it needs to be remembered that TCS under this section 52 is on billing basis and it is not on collection basis. For example, if I have made a supply on cash on delivery basis, let us say in the month of April, I have received an order. I have sent the goods also in April, but I received the payment in case of cash on delivery transaction, let's say on 3rd of May. TCS is to be collected in the month of April or May? The answer is it is to be done in the month of April. It is to be done on billing basis and not collection basis. Further, TCS is not required to be collected on exempt supplies. That means where the main supply, that means the supply between the seller and the buyer is exempt, TCS is not required to be collected. In case of RCM transactions, also TCS is not applicable. Only in case of outward supplies it is applicable. Further, no TCS on supplies made by unregistered suppliers. So the seller who is supplying through the e-commerce platform is unregistered. In that case, also TCS is not required. So let's say a restaurant who's having a turnover of less than 20 lakh rupees, if it's not registered, in that case, the Zomato or Swiggy will not deduct TCS for that restaurant. TCS is not applicable in import of goods or services. Fair enough. It is applicable only on supplies. Further, payment of TCS is not allowed through ITC. It has to be done through cash. Whatever payment is done by the e-commerce operator, that has to be done through cash. If sales return are more than the supplies made during any tax period. For example, in this month, what has happened is the sales return that has been received by the vendor is 200 rupees, whereas the supplies that was made was 180 rupees. So this is considering as minus 20 rupees. Then what happens to TCS? TCS is not required to be deducted in this case, this month. Interest and penalties applicable on omission as well as on incorrect particulars. So interest and penalties applicable in both the cases wherever the e-commerce operator forgets to forgets to deduct the TCS, or where it deducts incorrect TCS. In all these cases, it would be applicable. TCS is to be collected once the supply has been made through the e-commerce operator. I've already said this, and where the business model is that consideration is to be collected by the e-commerce operator irrespective of the actual collection of consideration. I've already mentioned this when I was discussing TCS, that who actually collects the consideration does not matter. Maybe the seller is directly collecting the consideration, but it is liable to be collected by Amazon or Flipkart. In this case also, TCS is required to be collected. Who is actually collecting the consideration does not matter. Who is liable to collect the consideration matters here. Right? Next, in case of multiple e-commerce operator through which services are provided, TCS is to be collected by e-commerce operator making payment to such supplier. Let's take a situation that let's say we are booking a hotel through Trivago, right? In case of Trivago, what happens? It is an e-commerce platform on which if we go, we'll see the website through which we'll be able to have the lowest price on another website. Let's say booking.com. Through Trivago, I go to booking.com. Now, the customer is approaching Trivago and booking.com is approaching the hotel. Then question comes in whether TCS is to be collected by Trivago or is it to be collected by booking.com. Here it is being said that TCS is to be collected by the person who is making the payment to the supplier, right? The person who is making the payment to the supplier, that is booking.com, will be the one who will be liable to collect the TCS, right? Okay. Registration by e-commerce operator. Now registration is required by e-commerce operator in each state where seller is located. So whether e-commerce operator is located in that state or not, it is important that registration should be taken by e-commerce operator in every state wherein his vendor is located. If e-commerce operator does not have any place of business in that state, he can show his own head office, which may be in another state, as his place of business, even for that state. For TCS purposes, what he will do is, he can, when he's registering for TCS, he can have one state mentioned in part A where he does not have any physical person. So in one state, he does not have a place of business. He can mention that state in his part A. So let's say a Karnataka e-commerce operator may not have any place of business in Tamil Nadu. So in that case, in Tamil Nadu, he will mention that state in Tamil Nadu as in his part A. In part B, he will mention Karnataka as his place of business in part B, right? Okay. Other features of composition levy. Person should not be making sub-commerce operator required to collect TCS. So in case of composition levy, so if I'm a person who is making a supply through e-commerce operator, that is Amazon or Flipkart, or I'm a restaurant supplying through e-commerce operator, I cannot make an application under composition scheme, right? Compulsory registration without any threshold. E-commerce operator, if such services are provided through it under 9(5). So what we are saying here is essentially who are liable to register. We're talking about Uber, Ola, 9(5). If you remember, we had seen the list of services: Uber, Ola, Urban Clap, Oyo Rooms. All these are required. Persons required to collect TCS, that is e-commerce operator, right? So what we are seeing essentially in front of us is who is the person required to collect TCS? Amazon, Flipkart, or it may be Swiggy, Zomato. All these are required to take registration. Person supplying through e-commerce operator who is required to collect TCS. So if I'm a person who is supplying service through the e-commerce operator, then also I'm required to take registration. But if I'm a person who's a service provider, in case of a restaurant, as I mentioned, a turnover who's having a turnover of up to 20 lakh rupees, then it may not take registration, apart from supplier of services. But if I'm a supplier of goods and I'm supplying through Amazon or Flipkart, then I need to take mandatory registration, irrespective of my turnover. Last is person supplying services of OIDR services from outside India to within India. We'll discuss this in detail. After some time, we'll discuss this in detail. Wherever OIDR services are provided from outside India to within India, I have an extensive discussion on this as well. Okay, we'll see a few aspects in front of us. Tax payable by e-commerce operator. What is this advanced ruling of Maharashtra, which we are seeing in front of us? In this case, applicant was into the business of assisting believers or followers or devotees to book pandits. So if somebody wants to book a pandit, there's an option, there's a platform through which he can book a pandit for performing a puja or abhishek, and the consideration is received by the e-commerce operator, and then the e-commerce operator, what they would do is they would have an agreement with the pandit and they would provide the consideration to the pandit after deducting their commission, right? The actual services which is provided by of puja and abhishek are exempt. Religious ceremonies provided are exempt as per the exemption notification. So question came in whether the consideration which is collected by the e-commerce operator, whether the entire amount is taxable or is it only the commission amount which is taxable. So let us say 1,000 rupees is received by that e-commerce operator, 200 is the commission. They are in turn paying 800 rupees to the pandit. So here it was said that tax will be only leviable on 200 rupees because the entire 1,000 rupees of services which is provided by pandit to the final customer, that is considered to be exempt in nature. Only 200 rupees would be taxable. Further, a few issues which are there for e-commerce operator. In a lot of cases, this does not appear on the common portal of the vendor. So where the vendor fills up his return without taking the credit of TCS, he may have an excess amount in his electronic cash ledger, which may be difficult to obtain as a refund. Even though it has been said practically that excess amount of TCS is the refund in the frequently asked questions, we've seen in a lot of practical scenarios where the government is denying the refund of TDS and TCS and saying that this refund is not allowable as per section 54, stating that there is no provision for refund of amount which is there in the electronic cash ledger in the form of TDS or TCS. Only if there's an excess deposit of TDS or TCS, then only it is allowed as a refund. To that extent, that means let's say only 1% was allowed, somebody has deposited 2%. In that case, the 1% which is the excess deposit can be claimed as a refund, but not the original amount. This has been the situation in a lot of cases wherein the issues have gone to a number of forums and we are yet to have a clarification on this from the government. In fact, there have been appeals which have been filed in respect of this to high courts, writ petitions have been filed, but we are yet to receive a concrete judgment on that. Next is issue of sale reconciliation due to late arrivals of sales report. Again, practical issue that vendor has a very difficult task in front of him, specifically wherein he gets sales report from different e-commerce platforms, and a vendor may be enlisted on both Amazon, Flipkart, or maybe other e-commerce platforms as well. In that case, the sales reconciliation, which should contain the list of sales return and everything, that arrives very late for him, and he is not able to reconcile as to for which vendor, for which customers he should issue a credit note. So if he has 100 invoices that he has cut, and apart from that he's also got a number of items in each invoice, it becomes difficult for him. That is why it is recommended that the e-commerce the vendor should always have the name of customer written with him. As soon as the order is received, they should have a proper list, proper data which considers the name of the customer which is written. A lot of cases is not there. Reconciliation of payment against orders, especially in case of goods returned. Again, payment reconciliation, if you look at the e-commerce operator himself, if we consider Amazon or Flipkart, they may be having huge numbers of orders every day. Now a lot of orders get returned, and there are a lot of multiple loyalty point discounts, coupon codes, cashbacks, which all needs to be reversed. So this reconciliation of payment received is again a huge task. You also need to remember the payment is also linked to the ITC. If payment is not made within 180 days to the relevant person, then ITC may not be available. So reconciliation of payment is also a huge task, not only for the e-commerce operator, but also for the vendor. Even for the vendor, whatever amount was at which the goods were sold and whatever amount is being received, there's a huge difference within that. It may be due to the commission amount which is being deducted because of payment gateway charges, a lot of charges which are deducted online, TCS which is deducted. So basically payment reconciliation is a huge task for these kind of people. Cancellation of e-way bill where order cancelled before movement. So e-commerce platform, for them e-way bill also is a task wherein, let's say, not less than 10,000 trucks per day would be moving for them. So cancellation of e-way bill if the order gets cancelled for any particular, so one needs to modify the content of the goods which are being moved in every truck and every invoice. It needs to be modified. It's a huge task. What happens in certain scenarios where the goods have left the premises and the order is cancelled during the process of delivery? In that case, it may be received by one of the local warehouses. So it may happen, let's say goods were about to be sent from West Bengal, let's say from Calcutta to Nasik, right? In that case, it may happen that the goods had first reached Mumbai port, but as soon as it reached the Mumbai port, the delivery got cancelled before the goods could reach Nasik. There is no point sending the goods to Nasik. The goods had been stored at a local warehouse in Mumbai itself. In such case, the order needs to be cancelled, as well as a stock transfer may need to be recognized from one place to the other, from West Bengal to Maharashtra by the e-commerce operator himself. E-way bill during reverse logistics, reattempted delivery. In a lot of cases, the customer is not there, so the delivery needs to be reattempted. In such cases, the e-way bill may expire and new e-way bill needs to be generated. There may be reverse logistics cost which should be there. Reverse logistics cost where the goods are being returned. Then ITC accumulation in the garments industry. Now let's understand this very practically. A very big chunk of the e-commerce industry belongs to the garments. Wearing apparels are sold online, and this has a huge industry. And there's a lot of goods return also which happens in this garments industry because of the size, the fit, the color, which is different from what is there online. Or it is not, the customer is not able to anticipate the size of the garment which is to be received by him. Now let us understand how does ITC accumulation happens in this case. So let us say my goods are being sold at a rate of 5%. It may be 12% also where the value is more than 1,000 rupees. Let's say it is sold at 5%. Let us say the purchase price was 50 rupees and the sale value was 100 rupees. At 50 rupees, 5% was the ITC, that is 2.5 rupees. Sale value ITC, sale value the GST is 100 rupees into 5%, which is 5 rupees. Now, a very big part of the cost of the vendors is the commission which is charged by the e-commerce operator. This commission may range between 25% to 40%. Let us imagine that the commission amount is 30 rupees in this case. 30% was the commission amount. In case of 30 rupees, the GST which is charged by the e-commerce operator to the vendor is 18%. So 30 into 18% is 5.4 rupees. 5.4 rupees was the ITC on the commission, 2.5 rupees was that on the purchase. That means his ITC, which is there, is 7.9 rupees, whereas his output is 5 rupees. But this 2.9 rupees cannot be allowed as a refund. We need to remember that inverted duty structure is only applicable where the rate on inputs is higher than that of the output. Simply because rate of input services is higher, there is no refund allowed. So 18% was the rate of input services. Rate of input was 5%. Still there was an ITC accumulation. There is no refund available. To this extent, this is a cost for the industry. Now let us come to an important aspect of OIDR services, which is part of our discussion today. In case of OIDR services, what happens? In case of OIDR services, services are mediated by IT over electronic network, nature of which renders their supplies essentially automated and involves minimal human intervention and impossible to ensure in absence of information technology. Now, it may seem like a very complex definition. It is not. What is important to understand here is, first of all, delivery should be over IT network. So whatever services are being delivered, this is again a service. This cannot be goods. So what is being delivered is only through network. There is no physical delivery of goods or services which is happening here. And it should be essentially automated. That means it should be involving in minimal human intervention. So the question comes in, let us say I am providing a lecture here right now over this Zoom call. Do you think this is OIDR services? If you are charging for this, do you think it is OIDR services? You need to remember that this is not automated. This is not involving minimal human intervention, because again, there are people who are organizing this meeting, who are taking great efforts to organize this meeting. And even there's a live speaker who has to be there. But let us say this meeting now gets uploaded and this lecture is now available at a cost. Anybody can click on the link and he can download that online. And there is no human intervention involved. In that case, it becomes a OIDR service. This is an essential difference which we need to realize. And impossible to ensure in absence of IT. So without IT, it is impossible to provide such services. What are the examples of this? The examples of this can be advertising on the internet. It may be Google ads, it may be Facebook ad, all these ads which are provided online automatically on, let's say on OLX also, if services are provided online, if you're enlisting through featured platform of OLX, then also it is advertising on the internet. Providing cloud services, it may include web hosting services or web designing services, which is provided by, let's say, GoDaddy, server hosting services, data warehousing services. All these are services which are provided over the cloud. Provision of ebooks, movies, music, software, and other intangibles via internet. So a lot of softwares are available online which you can download. If you look at Play Store, a lot of softwares are available online. You can download movies through Netflix. Even Netflix is wherein you have to subscribe on a monthly basis, or on a music platform, let's say on Savan Pro, if you're having any subscription, or even ebooks, Amazon Kindle, you're having a subscription. All these are online services which are automated. So there is no manual intervention here. No, when you order for a book, nobody sends a book online to you. It is automated. Once you click on a link, you are able to download it. Downloading of antivirus, downloading of drivers, let's say printer driver you're downloading online, firewalls are downloaded online. All the content apps that we are seeing in front of us, Amazon Prime Video and everything. Provision of data or information to any person in electronic form through a computer network. So if you're downloading, let's say, a desktop theme, even let's say you're having a subscription of Taxman, let's say, in that case, you are required to pay for getting that service, for accessing case laws, for accessing information over electronic network, which is available to a certain group of people who are paying for that. Again, this is considered to be OIDR services. online supplies of digital content, automated distance learning, as we said, an example of you click on a link and you're getting a distance learning, Udemy, an academy, all these are providing these services. Digital data storage, wherein you are getting Google Drive, OneDrive, Dropbox, all these spaces online. Online gaming services, which may include Zapak.com, even Play Stores if you're downloading games. And once you even download games, within the games also, you would see there are a lot of payments that you have to make for getting the content. All these are OIDR services. Now let's understand a few more examples as to how do we differentiate as to what is OIDR, what is not OIDR. In all the cases that we are seeing in front of us, the provision of services over IT network. But the important aspect we need to note is whether it is automated and impossible in the absence of IT information technologies, that what we are seeing in front of us. Let us say I am providing an opinion, right? Now a client had approached me. Now I'm emailing a PDF of my opinion to him. There is no physical sending of documents. Is it an OIDR service? The answer is no. It is not automated. It is not automated. There is no. It is not impossible in absence of technology, right? I can still send those opinion to him offline also. There is no requirement of information technology, but it is only mediated through it. And it is not automated. There's a manual intervention here clearly involved. Next, now, second case is where I upload a PDF online and anybody can click on the link. They have to make a payment and they can download that PDF file, right? That is something which is an OIDR services because it is happening automatically. Once again, PDF document downloaded automatically from site. Again, it is OIDR services. Second case was automatically emailed by provider system. In the second case, let's say there's a particular time when 10,000 people are receiving my updates. Let's say if I'm sending 10,000 updates to people and for which I'm charging to everyone. In that case, it is automatically emailed at a particular point in time. There is no manual intervention. Again, this is OIDR services. Stock photographs available for automatic download. So if you're, there are certain photographs, for example, you get linked to a particular website where you can download photographs online. So once again, it is a OIDR service. Online course consisting of pre-recorded videos and downloadable PDFs. I've already said this. If you have pre-recorded videos on Udemy, an academy, you can click on the link and download it. That is an OIDR service. But if online course consists of pre-recorded videos and downloadable PDF, plus there's a support from a live tutor. There's a live tutor who is supporting you in these videos and downloading PDFs. There's a live tutor which is there. Is it automated? The answer is no, because if without the because there is a live tutor who is making a manual intervention here, that is why it is not OIDR services. Individually commissioned content sent in digital form. So if I'm sending a medical report, hospital sends us a medical report, photographs. So if I'm sending my test to the hospital, let's say, and is providing the medical reports to me. In that case, once again, it is not OIDR service. It can be collected offline also, right? In case of OIDR services, place of supplies, location of recipient of service. How do we know what is the location of service of recipient? Two conditions, any of these two conditions, if get satisfied, we will know that place of supply will be the OIDR service of the recipient. So OIDR services may be provided from online or it may be provided from outside India or within India, right? So OIDR services, even if it is provided from outside India, we need to find out whether the person who is receiving the service will be considered to be in India or not. Simply, it may happen that a person who is on a trip from outside India is in India for 10 to 15 days. Suddenly he buys something online. Does it mean he's received the services in India? So we have to see which cases we know where the recipient is in the taxable territory. Location of address presented by the recipient of service via the internet. What is the recipient's address which he has given? Debit card, credit card, where has it been issued? So the payment which has been made for buying these services online, the debit card, credit card, or the bank account, where is this actually, has it been issued? Next, the billing address of the recipient. What is the billing address of the recipient in the taxable territory? What is the IP address? What is the bank of recipient which is being used? Country code of SIM card used. So a lot of orders happen online, which is happening through OTPs nowadays. So in that case, one knows the country code which is of the SIM card. So which is the SIM card, which country code is there within it? Location of the fixed line through which service is received by the recipient in taxable territory. So if I'm using a fixed line services, fixed broadband line, where is the broadband line located? All these are important. If any two of these conditions get satisfied within India, then in that case, tax is to be paid within India. Person supplying OIDR services from outside India to non-taxable online recipient to take mandatory registration through simplified registration scheme. Again, these are OIDR compliances. If there's an OIDR service provided outside India, he needs to make a registration in REG 10. He needs to file a return in a simpler format, GSTR 5A. Further, question comes in where a lot of people say that how will the government know if the recipient is in India? Trust me on this, wherever any forex spends are happening. So if you're swiping your debit card or credit card or your bank account for making a forex spending, that means you're subscribing to, let's say, Amazon.com and not Amazon.in. Amazon.in is in India, Amazon.com is in US. If you're making a subscription through Amazon.us, Amazon US, then whatever forex spending that you're making there, that all records are there with the government. Now, wherever the e-commerce operator or the OIDR services provider are not in India, in that case, also, if the recipient is in India, they may have to make sure that they have to that the person who is representing that e-commerce operator needs to pay such tax on behalf of the e-commerce operator. If there is no person who is there in India, in that case, the e-commerce operator or OIDR is required to appoint a person for making payment of such taxes. Now, there's one more advanced ruling judgment, which is from Maharashtra itself, Spring Nature Customer Service Center. Here it has been said, if OIDR services are provided from outside India, let's say, to unregistered persons for other than business profession. Let's say I subscribe to Netflix US, not Netflix India. In that case, Netflix US, if it is selling, it is allowing me to purchase its subscription in India, then tax is required to be paid by Netflix US. Because it is not for business or profession, so tax will be paid by Netflix US. Second is, if it is provided to a government, local authority or governmental authority or even to an individual. So here meaning an individual means a sole proprietor who are registered. If all these persons are registered, then tax will not be paid by the e-commerce by the OIDR service provider, but it will be paid under RCM. It would be considered as import of services, even though it is OIDR services. Further, if the customers receiving the services are receiving it for industry, business or profession. If somebody is receiving a service from outside India for their business purposes, even though it is online. So there's a website on which, let's say there's a Google ad. A Google ad services being provided to a business platform. Business platform who's receiving the Google ad services, even though it is OIDR services, will be liable to pay under RCM. So anybody who's apart from a sole proprietor, a partnership, a business, a private limited company, all these cases will definitely be under RCM. They cannot say that it is not for business. And even an individual has been talked about in the second case, that if he is registered, he needs to pay under RCM. But in case of individual, it may become slightly difficult to justify that whether it is for business or profession or not. So in this case, who is the one who is liable to justify? In that case, the OIDR service provider, on the OIDR service provider, the burden of proof would be there to justify that the person who had received the services had received it for business or profession. If it had been received for business or profession, the recipient will pay taxes. If it is for other than business profession, the service provider will pay taxes. Right? Now we are discussing a few basic revenue models. I'll talk about a few business models which we'll see in front of us. How do the companies work? How do the GST work in these cases? Let us say a person is placing an order on Amazon for 1,000 rupees plus GST, 18%. The Amazon informs the seller. Seller packages and hands over the goods to Amazon, right? Now, the e-commerce operator would be sending the goods to the customer. So seller will be giving an invoice of 1,000 plus 180, which is 1,180. Amazon delivers the goods to the customer at 1,180 by giving an invoice of the seller, assuming there is no delivery charges being separately paid by the customer here. Now, Amazon is required to pay the amount which is to the seller. How will the amount be paid? Let's say the order value was 1,180. Commission was 30%. 30% was the commission. 3% I have taken here is in the example as commission, but I have divided it under other aspects also. Let's say 3% was the commission. Of course, it may be higher also. The shipping charges are being collected separately. So 3% is the commission. 3% of 1,000, which is 30 rupees. Delivery charges separately was 20 rupees, right? Payment collection fees is 10 rupees. And the fixed fees, which is the listing charges. Let's say Amazon is also collecting listing charges from the seller for listing the product online. So all these is coming out to 100 rupees, let's say 10% of the total value. Again, this may differ on website to website. I'm just taking an example. Don't assume that this is what Amazon does, right? The actual commission may vary from 25% to 40% also. Or as I mentioned, in case of C plus L model, 10 to 15% plus the logistics cost. For sake of simple calculation, I've taken 100 rupees as the commission amount, including everything here: commission, delivery charges, collection fees, fixed fees. 100 rupees, on 100 rupees, 18% is the GST. So 18 rupees on this 100 rupees will further be deducted because Amazon will raise an invoice of 100 rupees plus 18 rupees on the seller. Plus the TCS would be 2% of 1,000 rupees. 1,000 was the base order value, TCS is 20 rupees. The balance 1,042 will be paid to the seller. Further, this TCS will be deposited by Amazon to Government of India. And then the seller, what he's required to do is, he will have the output tax of 180 rupees because he was the seller here who had issued the invoice. He will deposit tax of 180. He will obviously get a credit of 20 rupees for the TCS which was deposited, right? Obviously, other ITC would also be there. I'm not getting into that part for the seller for purchase of goods. Now let us look at Swiggy basic revenue model. Let's say Swiggy is placing an order let's say a person is placing an order on Swiggy at 1,050 rupees including GST plus delivery charges. So this is 1,000 plus 50 rupees is the GST, 5% GST, and 59 rupees is the delivery charges in front of us. The order is the restaurant is informed about the order. Restaurant then packages and hands over the GST invoice to Swiggy at 1,000 plus 50. Delivery charges, we need to remember, is levied by Swiggy and not by a restaurant. Swiggy, what it will do is it will deliver the food and it will collect 1,109. It will hand over the GST invoice of 1,000 plus 50 rupees, but it will not hand over the invoice of 59 rupees for delivery charges, which is again collected separately, for which unfortunately these people don't give tax invoices. Obviously in their records they have to maintain these tax invoices. Now Swiggy is making the payment of the amount settled to restaurant. Order value was 1,050. Commission was 5%, let's say. 5% of 1,000 was 50 rupees. Base value was 1,000. GST was 9 rupees. TCS is once again 20 rupees. 2% of 1,000. 971 rupees is paid by Swiggy to the restaurant. And then 20 rupees is deposited by Swiggy to the government's account. And then restaurant is required to deposit the amount of 50 rupees. Please ignore this 20 rupees credit here. 20 rupees of credit will not be available. This 20 rupees credit will be available to the restaurant because this is in the form of TCS, which will be taken as credit by the restaurant here. But any ITC which is there will not be available to the restaurant. So any GST which is in the form of commission which is charged by Swiggy to the restaurant will not be allowed as credit. But this 20 rupees of TCS will be allowed from the electronic cash ledger. Further, Swiggy will deposit 9 rupees GST on the delivery charges to the government. Now let us look at Oyo Room's basic revenue model. Somebody books a room on Oyo at 2,000 rupees. Again, Oyo has this model wherein they would pre-book the room at 1,500 plus GST. So Oyo may book 10 rooms in a hotel every day and at a bulk discount. So 1,500 rupees plus GST is what is charged by the hotel to Oyo, and a hotel will pay GST on 1,500 rupees, and Oyo, what it will do is it will take ITC of the amount of GST on 1,500 rupees. Again, I have not written the amount of GST because it may depend on hotel to hotel as to what is the rate, because that upon the declared tariff, the rate of GST may change here, right? So output tax is paid on 2,000 rupees here, right? So 2,000 rupees is the output tax and ITC is 1,500 rupees that we see in front of us. So again, the GST on these two, this is like purchase and sale for Oyo rooms. Book My Show. Let's say I book a ticket on Book My Show, 5 tickets for 1,280 plus convenience charges of plus Book My Show charges, let's say convenience charges of 100 rupees plus GST. In this case, what happens? Book My Show will book the tickets in Inox for 1,000 plus 28%. So 1,280 is the base value for which Book My Show will book the tickets on behalf of the customer, for which GST will be paid by Inox on 280 rupees, because Inox is the one who will be giving the tickets here, and Book My Show will pay the GST on the convenience charges which is retained by Book My Show. Let us see the model for free charge. I'm not taking Paytm because Paytm has a lot of models. We can assume Paytm here also. I did not take Paytm because Paytm is now into a lot of businesses, and it is not only simply a wallet. So you can assume Paytm also, Paytm wallet. If you're adding money to Paytm wallet, let's say there's a mobile bill which is paid from free charge of 1,000 rupees. And Vodafone, let's say, pays a commission of 25 rupees plus GST on this bill which is paid. Vodafone will confirm the amount to the customer, and in this case, what will happen is free charge, since it has charged commission from Vodafone, it will pay GST on the commission amount. Further, if the customer, after adding money to the wallet, wants to withdraw that money, right? In that case, it will be having bank charges of 100 rupees, let's say, deducted from that. So bank charges, whatever amount are bank transfer charges, whatever is deducted by free charge, once the amount is transferred back to the customer into his bank, let's say there's a GST, there's a transfer charges, against that GST needs to be paid at the rate of 18%. Now we are looking at Uber. Uber is adding money to the, let's say a person is now booking Uber through Paytm. He's first adding money to the wallet and then he requests a ride for 210 rupees. Why 210? Simple calculation, 200 plus 5% GST. Uber passes the booking to the driver. Amount is deducted from the Paytm, right? This we all know. Now let's see what is the implication of GST which happens after this. Now, Uber is now, let's say, paying the settlement amount to the driver after deducting 25% commission, right? This is a standard practice wherein they are deducting 25% commission. So out of this ride for 200 plus GST, so 50 rupees is retained by Uber and 150 rupees is paid as settlement amount to the driver, right? And 50 rupees is deducted as commission. Who is the service provider for the commission? This is the Uber to the driver. So Uber will charge GST on this 50 rupees commission, right? For this 200 rupees ride, who is the service provider? It is the driver. But as per 9(5), Uber is deemed to be the service provider or who is deemed to be the supplier. So Uber will pay GST not only on this 50 rupees commission, 50 rupees commission, 18% GST is 9 rupees. It will also pay the GST of 10 rupees on the ride, which is booked by the customer. Uber will issue the invoice to the customer. So in turn, now Uber will pay GST of 200 rupees and it will also pay GST of 50 rupees, right? So Uber will have to pay both for the service provided by the driver and its own service provided to the driver. Let's say now Uber needs to pay service charges to Paytm because it is using the service, because Uber is having an agreement with Paytm. That is why we are able to make the payment through Paytm. I'm just assuming the charges is 10 rupees per ride that Uber is paying to the Paytm, right? So here 10 rupees plus GST is paid by Uber, for which Paytm will pay GST of 1.8 rupees to the government, for which Uber can take the credit. Urban Clap.
Excuse me, Shubham sir.
Yeah.
Sir, last 20 minutes are remaining. Can we go for question and answer round?
we can, if you allow me to complete, I think it will take 2 minutes. I think not more than that.
Okay, sir. Yes, sir.
Yeah. So let us say a person requests for a plumber on Urban Clap for 590 rupees. The Urban Clap passes the booking to the plumber. Now, Urban Clap pays the settlement amount of 400 rupees after deducting of commission of 100 rupees here, right? In that case, Urban Clap will pay GST on both services provided by the plumber and on the service and the commission amount which it is deducting for the plumber, similar to Urban Clap here, right? So in case of OLX, what happens? If somebody posts a featured ad online, right? In that case, the seller who posts a featured ad online, this is considered to be OIDR services for which OLX is required to pay to the government. If buyer finds the ads and buys the mobile phone online for 30,000 rupees, let's say the ad was for a mobile phone. In that case, the seller will be the one who will pay the GST on the mobile phone. OLX will not do so. I think this is pretty much it for our discussion today. Thank you so much for your patient hearing. And now I would request whatever questions are there, I'll be happy to take them.
So there are some questions in chat. Should I read them for you?
Okay, there are some. I'll just see the chat box 1 second. I haven't seen it till now.
And the first query is from Prateek Bhutada.
Okay, Prateek Bhutada. Okay, yeah. If we consider driver and Uber as independent party, relationship is principal to principal, then TDS provisions under income tax would be attractive. See, I won't comment upon income tax because I'm not the best person to answer this query. I'm not really sure whether I should answer this properly or not because I'm pretty, I'm not having a great idea about how Uber and Ola is actually complying under income tax. Okay. Hello, everyone. Please rename yourself. This is
you can skip that, sir. You can skip.
Yeah, whether a driver needs to be registered under GST. No, the answer is no. The driver does not need to be registered under GST in case of Uber and Ola services. But if you consider a DriveU example where the driver is not providing services with transportation, but only DriveU app provides you a driver, in that case, driver needs to pay the taxes. In that case, driver may need to be registered if his turnover is more than 20 days. Please throw some focus on excess balance in cash ledger on account of higher TCS because, okay, I'll discuss this particular aspect once again. What happens is, in certain cases, the TCS amount, as I gave the example in case of a person who is selling garments online, let's say 50 rupees was the product purchase price and 100 rupees was the sale price. And 1000 rupees was the sale price. So 5% GST is there on the input, 5% GST is there on the output. And on commission amount of 30 rupees, 18% was the GST, which is coming to 5.4 rupees. Now, here we know that TCS will also be further deducted. This TCS amount will never be probably used because the entire amount is itself having an excess balance because there's an ITC itself, which is of 7.9 and my output is 5 rupees. So 2.9 rupees is my input. So my cash ledger amount, I may not be able to use ever. So can we get the refund of this amount? To my humble opinion, yes, it should be allowed. Even in the frequently asked questions, which was released by the government in October 18, it had been said it is allowed, but we are seeing, and online, if you have an option of going online and just simply getting a refund of balance prevailing in the electronic cash ledger. But practically, we are seeing that in a number of situations, department is saying that in the circular which was issued in circular 125 in September 2019, it had only talked about refund of excess balance in TDS or TCS. It had not talked about the balance which is prevailing due to any other reason. So they are saying that this cash ledger amount is not liable to be refunded, though we sincerely argue against this. This is my money. Cash ledger is supposed to be something which is like a wallet for me, from which I'm making the payment to the government. TCS is only a provision which is introduced for making sure that there's a check upon me that I as a seller should not sell goods without GST. So there's a check upon me. This TCS provision is not there for higher deduction of taxes. TCS is not a tax, but it is merely a prepayment of GST. So personally, I believe this GST refund should be allowed. But practically, even though we are seeing that it is not being allowed, I hope that there would be a decision which would allow us, if we go to appeals and to the relevant forums, it should be allowed. First and foremost thing is making sure that we are doing an application. If we are doing an application, most of the cases, they would not allow us the refund. But if they are allowing us the refund, well and good. If they deny the refund against that refund order, there is no other option but to file a appeal before the next higher appellate authority. Suppose a cake and pastry maker has a shop where we can eat or have takeaway, but the maximum sales is through e-commerce operator. What will be the tax implications in that case? As the baker would not be allowed composition scheme given he's using e-commerce platform. Can he charge GST at the rate of 5% in the normal scheme? To be honest, there were a few advanced ruling judgments also which had come in case of bakeries, which is also providing us an option of takeaway and an eatery as well. So I think the case here is e-commerce platform. So we are assuming it is a delivery platform. In that case, I believe this is simply considered to be goods, because what is happening here is sale of those goods. There is no service being provided, which is it is like the sale of goods, which is along with the transportation as the ancillary service here. So here the bakery is the one who's selling the goods, and the service of transportation is ancillary. So the service is that of goods, and whatever rate is there on cakes, that would be charged here. It would not be in a normal restaurant scheme, in my humble opinion. In case of OIDR services, what shall be the place of supply in case of multi-state operations? That is, where creation and uploading of e-learning content is being uploaded from multiple locations and location of receiver is not known. So first of all, I think there are two aspects which are there. First of all, location of service provider, and second is the location of recipient. I think there's an issue with both. So first of all, with regard to location of recipient, we know the location of recipient, how to determine it in case of OIDR services, which we have seen 2 conditions out of the 7 conditions getting satisfied. But in case it is not being provided from outside India, it is being provided from within India. In that case, what will happen is the location of recipient will have to go into the definition as to who is the person who is liable to make the payment of tax. So the person who is liable to make the payment of taxes, once again, we'll have to look at the address which is provided by that person. If he's not providing the address, then the address which is available in the records of the supplier, because even in any website which is there today, I don't see that any website allows us to register and avail any services without taking our details online. So most of them ask for our details online. So the location of recipient is mostly there. And location of supplier of service, if we look at it, the definition of supplier of service is also provided under the GST law and IGST Act, which says that if I'm providing service from a registered place of business, then that registered place of business. But if I'm providing service from a place which is not registered, then the fixed establishment. That means if I'm having a fixed established from which is that fixed place of business is having, that fixed establishment is having human and technical resources and is capable of providing services from there, then only it will be considered as location of service, right? So I am a service provider who's from West Bengal, but in the meantime, if I record a video from let's say Madhya Pradesh while I am in Madhya Pradesh, it does not mean that supplier of service is Madhya Pradesh. The supplier of service will still be West Bengal because my fixed establishment, my place of business is again West Bengal here, right? Next, in a case where Uber provides discount to the end customer being in the form of coupons, would the amount be liable to GST reversal? Okay, there are a lot of schemes which a lot of people run, not just Uber. So what happens in those discount schemes, all of them needs to be analyzed separately. Let's say in case of a cashback scheme, Uber has a cashback scheme wherein whatever payment is made through Paytm, there's a cashback which is received. In that case, Uber will charge the entire amount of GST on let's say on the entire ride of 200 rupees. Let's say the customer receives a cashback of 50 rupees. that cashback is not in the form of discount because that discount is not given by Uber but by Paytm. In that case, there's no GST reversal on this 50 rupees. But if let's say there's a discount which is given in the form of a pass, I buy an Uber pass for which they charge me 50 rupees per month. 50 rupees is something on which GST will be charged by them. Now I received a discount from Uber directly. A ride which is of 200 rupees is now showing at 180 rupees to me. So now GST will be charged on 180 rupees and not on 200 rupees by Uber. If we consider driver and Uber as independent party, that is relationship is
that's what you have already answered.
Yeah.
Shubham sir, yeah.
Yeah. So I've already taken that.
Yes, there is a next query from Vivek sir.
Okay, it's a long one. 1 second. Assessi has listed his products on Amazon US. All right. Assessi sends goods from India through air courier or ship cargo. All right. These goods are stored in Amazon US warehouse on our behalf and sold as and when the order is placed by the customer. Okay. Amazon US is remitting the sales proceed after deducting the facility charges, commission in USD on monthly basis. All right. Assessi's refund of ITC is linked with export data, but indirectly is maintaining stock in US which is not actually sold. What should be the ideal process and accounting flow? Okay, I'll tell you about GST here for sure. So here goods are being sent from India to US, but there is no export which is happening. So here this goods are being sent through air courier or cargo through a shipping bill, but not through an invoice, but through a mere delivery challan, right? So here, first of all, the goods will be kept at the warehouse of Amazon US. As soon as the goods are, as soon as the assessee receives a confirmation in India from Amazon US, he gives a sale invoice for exports. In that case, to show it as, in that case, what will happen is refund of ITC. I agree, it would be a difficult task because the shipping bill data in this case would not be linked to your export invoice. So if the shipping bill data is not linked to your export invoice online, to get the refund on export on payment of tax would be almost impossible here, because here in case of export on payment of taxes, the shipping bill data needs to be matched with the goods which are being sent here. But if the goods are being sent, goods are the first part, as I mentioned, in case of export with payment of tax, it would be almost impossible because this would not be through an automated system. Even in export without payment of tax, you would have to manually prove before the relevant officer that the goods which have gone through the shipping bill, which part of those goods have been sold and which part have not been sold. So this may be a very tricky task, to be honest, and convincing him as to which part has been sold, which has not been sold, may be a very tricky ask, to be honest. And only for those invoices for which you are able to link, for example, you had sent 100 quantities of goods, out of it 60 has been considered as sold. So you have to get refund in respect of 60 quantities. So shipping bill and invoice has to be matched, and it needs to be proven before the relevant officer. So I believe this model needs to be studied very closely, and we need to get into the aspect of how to convince the relevant officer that there's a matching between the shipping bill and the export invoice, because the original matching was between the shipping bill and the delivery challan and not the export invoice. So this might be a slightly tricky task, but I believe a refund should be allowed. I don't see any reason why it should not be allowed in this case for ITC. Next, can I avail ITC on other charges of e-commerce, that is commission? Of course, you can avail ITC on the commission amount. I have given that in multiple revenue models wherein the vendor is availing the ITC of the commission amount which is charged by the e-commerce operator. Next, if I am selling goods, then it is available commission paid to Flipkart and Amazon. Okay. I think the question is not very clear, but I think what is being tried to mention here is that if I am a vendor, I am selling through Flipkart or Amazon, then Flipkart or Amazon is supposed to deduct commission. Whatever commission is being deducted can I avail the ITC on this? The answer is yes, I can avail the ITC on this if the goods are being sold through Flipkart or Amazon. There is no doubt about that. Do we have any more questions?
Yes, sir. Shubham sir, one last query. The drop shipping model which you explained, you had given that in case of drop shipping model, we have two options. I have a doubt with respect to the second option, like a case wherein like I am registered on Amazon portal. I take orders from Amazon. I pass that these orders to the manufacturer, and manufacturer directly supplies the goods to the customer, and the bill is raised by manufacturer, and the bill is not raised by. Okay.
Correct.
In this particular case, I will be just raising a bill of commission,
Absolutely.
which will be a very nominal amount.
Absolutely.
But Amazon will be collecting TCS from me on the whole value of the goods supplied via Amazon.
Okay, sir, if you are doing it through Amazon, in this case, if you're doing it through Amazon, then in that case, you cannot register as a seller and have the billing made from the manufacturer. So, so only in a situation where you are, let's say, having your, let's say you are having your own e-commerce platform, or a case where TCS is not applicable, only in that case you would be able to do that. But where you are a seller, Amazon will never allow your manufacturer to issue an invoice. The vendor is liable to issue an invoice. The Amazon will never get into the model, because even the Amazon has to give in GSTR 8 and also in GSTR 9D a list of supplies which has been made through the seller, right? Made by the seller through its platform. So it will not be able to give the name of the manufacturer in that case. So it will never allow that kind of model.
Hello. Sir, one last query. Hello.
Yes, I can hear you, please.
Okay. Sir, there is classes. There is a group who is running classes, and they have also got their online presence. So the students
which one website are you talking about?
There is a group who are running online classes.
Okay, group running online classes. Okay.
So the students come directly to the website.
Okay.
And the faculty means they just pay you money, and the group has instructed to pay you that 30% of the amount should go to the group and 70% of the amount should go to the faculty. So this is how the arrangement is.
Okay.
My first question is whether this would be a e-commerce transaction. My second question is how should, as of now, the group is paying tax at 30% and the faculty is paying tax at 7%.
Okay. Okay. Are two invoices being raised by the group and the faculty, or is it one invoice which is being raised to the customer? Hello. I think I have. Okay, I am assuming that there are two invoices being raised. Since GST is being charged separately, 30 rupees and 70 rupees separately, there are two invoices being raised. And secondly, if you're talking about e-commerce transaction, the point is, even if it is an e-commerce transaction, nothing really changes here. So if I'm, let's say, the point is, if I'm having my own e-commerce website, whether I'm supplying my services through e-commerce platform, through my own website, or whether I'm getting a client, or I'm supplying it offline, in both the cases, I'm supposed to charge GST at 18%. It is only where implication would change, where the e-commerce platform is different and the seller is different. That means there's a vendor who's providing services through the e-commerce platform. So in this case, I believe, yes, it is an e-commerce supply because the supply is happening through the e-commerce platform, but nothing really changes because the transactions would still be taxable at 18% here.
Sir, can I avail the benefit of composition scheme over here?
So if you are talking about composition scheme, in my humble opinion, you should not avail the benefit of composition scheme, because in this case, you would be considered as a person supplying services or goods through the e-commerce website. So in that case, you are not allowed to avail the composition scheme.
So both the faculty as well as the group both can avail the e-commerce, the composition levy benefit.
just 1 second. Let me just read out the part whether it was talking about TCS. Let me just see section 10 here, whether it is talking about TCS specifically or not. Let me just see and get back to you. 1 second. Okay, he is not engaged in making supply through an e-commerce operator who is required to collect TCS. That is 10 subsection 2. So that means in this case, what will happen is the person who is in this case, what will happen is since there is no TCS provisions getting attracted, TCS will only get attracted if the e-commerce operator is separate and the vendor is separate. In this case, there is no TCS provisions attracted. So the bar which is there in section 10 subsection 2 will not be attracted. That means you can avail the composition scheme. In both the cases, there is no bar on that.
Okay, sir. So both the faculty as well as the group can go for the composition levy.
Yes. There's a new composition scheme which is for service provider 6%. You can go in that.
Thanks a lot, sir.
Yeah. Any more questions?
There's one question in chat box, sir, from Mr. Vivek.
Okay. Suppose I have some goods online. I have sold some goods online B2C in Delhi. I'm registered in Maharashtra. Okay. I need to give state-wise details in GSTR. In next month, sales are returned and there is no sale for the same month, that is Delhi. How to show this in GSTR? First of all, GSTR 1, there is no issue altogether. Because GSTR 1, you can simply show a credit note against this. And in GSTR 1, you can give a negative figure also. Actually, the issue comes in GSTR 3B. In GSTR 3B, the negative figure is not allowed, which is again a difficulty which is being faced throughout the industry. And we don't really have a solution for this. In fact, e-commerce industry is the one which is badly hit because there's a high rate of sales return in the e-commerce industry. When people don't have any option of showing sales return, you can only show the sales return during the month where you actually have the sale value. So probably in this month, if you don't have sales, in the next month when you have sales, you can reduce the sales return from the next. Otherwise, we don't have really got an option. This issue will get mitigated in the new returns where there's a negative adjustment of tax liability allowed. In GST, the problem is that at 3B, there is no negative value allowed because in 3B, there is no negative value which can be posted in the electronic liability ledger. So if negative liability cannot be posted, it cannot be adjusted with the positive liability of next month. That is why they don't allow this in 3B. So unfortunately, we have to wait till the new returns come in for this kind of issue to get solved. Yes. Any further questions?
No, sir, we are almost done. Shubham, we are done, right?
Yes, Ankit, please continue, Ankit. Yes.
Okay. Sir, I would like to give you formal vote of thanks. It's my privilege to have been asked to propose a vote of thanks to you, sir. I, on behalf of Young to Learn Group and the entire CA fraternity, extend a very heartful vote of thanks to Shubham Khetani, sir, for gracing our session and enlightening our knowledge. I may like to express our sincere thanks to you, sir, for giving an excellent coverage on GST e-commerce operator and sharing with us all the examples, illustration. You have covered majority of our pain areas. And we are very grateful to you for giving us precious time for the session and solving our queries and doubts. Your knowledge on the above subject is truly vast, sir. In depth, clear. It will surely help us in our practice. We thank you, sir, for sharing with us your knowledge and your time, sir. Thank you, sir.
Thank you so much. Thanks.
Thank you, all the participants.
Thank you, everyone, for your patient hearing.
Yes,
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you so much. Thanks.
Thank you, all the participants.
Thank you, everyone, for your patient hearing.
Yes,
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.